The Electoral College has spoken, and it says that Joe Biden is President-elect of the United States. So is it time to give up the fight? No, but it's definitely time to take stock of where we stand, and it's time for Hold the Line.
You know, in this battle for the soul of America, democracy prevailed. We, the people, voted. Faith in our institutions held. The integrity of our elections remains intact. And now it's time to turn the page, as we've done throughout our history, to unite, to heal.
That guy wants to be president for the next 8 years. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton, and as you saw, that was Joe Biden struggling to make it through his victory lap after the Electoral College certified his win. Biden cleared the necessary 270 vote mark during a vote held by the body last evening. The certification comes after lawsuits in several key states filed by the Trump campaign failed to yield the desired outcome, at least so far. So far. For the first time since Election Day, many Republicans are acknowledging that Biden should be called president-elect. Here's Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell talking about this earlier today.
Our system of government has processes to determine who will be sworn in on January the 20th. The Electoral College has spoken. So today I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden.
Despite McConnell's remarks and the vote of the Electoral College, President Trump's not ready to throw in the towel. Earlier today, he tweeted, quote, "Tremendous evidence pouring in on voter fraud. There has never been anything like this in our country." Let's take stock of where we are right now. I understand this is deeply frustrating. I understand that many of you watching this know in your heart, you feel in your soul that this election was crooked, that this was the result of fraud, certainly a small-scale fraud in places across the country, perhaps even systematic fraud that would have changed the eventual vote tallies enough to make Joe Biden the winner here instead of Donald Trump. And I know that. And I've seen and watched and heard the affidavits and the people coming forward at these hearings. I've interviewed the people on the Trump legal team many times. I'm in contact with them in back channel as well, talking to them about what they're seeing, what their possible pathways to success may be. I helped convince Sean Parnell, would-be member of Congress, he's still fighting out there for that congressional district, to take his challenge public and to make as much noise about this as he could because of the fraud that happened in Pennsylvania, where they overrode the state constitution because of the pandemic. So we are fighting this thing, and we're doing everything that we can, but we also need to understand where we are in this process and what the left, what the Democrats, what Joe Biden are going to be doing in the weeks and months ahead. Let's just first look at this. For the Trump team to prevail at this point, there are several hurdles. Even if, let's say, the Dominion voting machine audit that is getting so much attention today were to get real traction, were to be the kind of smoking gun evidence, which it is not yet clear that is the case. But if it were that, you would still need various levels in this process to go in favor of the president's completely legitimate legal challenge, right? Legitimate as in this is within the process. There's nothing about this that's a threat to our democracy. There's nothing about this that threatens to cause upheaval across the nation that we would never recover from and all this other stuff that you're hearing. That's all nonsense. But there are still challenges even with the presentation of fraud. You'd need to get a judge to be willing to say, we cannot certify this state's results anymore. Think about what that legal bar would look like for a judge, even a judge who is ethical and would be willing under some circumstances to take that kind of a dramatic action. But think of what the evidentiary bar would be. Think about what the DOJ would need to do here. Think of how the DOJ would have to also be pushing this case at the federal level, most likely, unless we're talking about the civil suits. But if we're looking at criminal fraud, it would be on the Department of Justice. The media has completely suppressed this. In fact, they spend most of their energy ridiculing and mocking Trump and anyone who's even asking for answers here. When, if we're being honest about this, at the end of the day, it's worth it to see, it's worth it to stress test the system right now and check and recheck and make sure that everything that was done here, every ballot that was cast and counted, was legal and legitimate and constitutional. That can only strengthen our democracy. That can only work to make us even more confident in this process. And we obviously can't count on the media to be honest about this, so we continue to bring this up. We continue to fight on this. We won't give it up just because they're telling us that it's now President-elect Biden, but we also have to prepare for what is coming down the pike. We have to get ready for this as well. As it stands today, Joe Biden is going to be the President of the United States in January of 2020. That's the way things are heading right now. That could change. It is very unlikely to change. We have to psychologically, we have to as a party emotionally get ready for the shock of this utter buffoon being the next President of the United States. We need to understand that that is an overwhelmingly likely situation and take action now. How will we make sure that we win those Georgia Senate runoffs so that Biden faces a divided Congress, which he certainly doesn't have the political skill or unifying characteristics to be able to get all that much out of? That's essential. That's critical. What does the GOP look like going forward? Is Donald Trump going to be effectively our president in exile? Is he going to be down in Florida directing the movement, bringing us together behind a MAGA agenda, making sure that there's a red wave in the midterms in 2 years? What are we going to do with all of that? Those are conversations we need to start to at least prepare for, because the left is getting ready with their agenda. They are seeing nothing but clear sailing ahead for what they're going to try to do. We need to understand where this is. Yes, it's possible, and I hate having to tell you this, that if you feel like they were crooks, the crooks may get away with it. It might actually happen. There is no special magic plan that's going to make all of this go away. But this is the country we have. It's still worth fighting for. It's the country we've got. And we're going to continue to push here. You could say we're going to continue to hold the line. That is our mandate. That is our mission. If there's more evidence, if there's more that comes forward, we will back it to the fullest possible extent. We believe in this system and in this process, and that means riding it out until the very end. But we also know that it does not guarantee a result. It does not even guarantee justice. So we have to be prepared, friends, and get ready for the fights that lie ahead. We'll continue to watch us here very closely, including some of the most recent legal challenges and the president's allegations. But we're also going to keep an eye open for what faces us down the way. Coming up, small businesses are feeling the squeeze as governors around the country implement increasingly rigid COVID-19 restrictions. When we come back, we'll talk to Mark Simone about the latest on this. Economic uncertainty has left us all wondering about the future. The stock market seems to blow back and forth like the winds of political change. So what do we do to protect ourselves and our income for the future? For over a decade now, simple and conservative real estate investing has been the retirement answer for thousands of done-for-you real estate clients, and is now part of my answer to retirement. I'm not just a believer in what done-for-you real estate does, I'm also a client. I recently closed on my first ever investment property with my friends at Done4You Real Estate. Their system flat out works. Done4You Real Estate found me an amazing property, got me the financing, got it all fixed up, and are now renting it out and managing it for me. They're an award-winning, groundbreaking company with 13 years of experience that allows everyday, hard-working Americans to finally own investment real estate without all the risk and difficulty of doing it on your own. Visit doneforyoubuck.com to learn more and find out if you qualify to take advantage of what may be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to finally own your own investment real estate.
It's going to take months before the vaccine hits critical mass. So this is the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a long tunnel.
That's right, a long tunnel that's going to include months of crippling shutdowns for restaurants and small businesses. Here in New York City, restaurant owners and workers rallied in Times Square today, lashing out at Governor Andrew Cuomo and Mayor Bill de Blasio for their recent decision to once again ban indoor dining in the Big Apple. Even in deep blue New York City, it seems some people are finally growing impatient with the government's heavy-handed response to this pandemic. For more, we turn to iHeartRadio talk show host on 710 WOR, Mark Simone. Mark, great to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
So what do you make of this most recent restaurant shutdown? This comes after they showed, we actually have the data here. Based upon the city's own numbers, restaurants and bars accounted for 1.43% of the spread. You see at the top there, household and social gatherings, almost 74%. Now, I know they'd say they can't shut down households, or at least not yet. They haven't. CUOMO hasn't figured out how to do that, Mark. But shutting down restaurants for 1%, that seems like a bit heavy-handed to a lot of folks who are going to lose their businesses.
It's crazy. I spend my whole life in restaurants, as you know, and I've been talking to every waiter, maitre d', busboy in hundreds of restaurants. Nobody is getting sick. These guys are there 8 hours a day. If they're not getting sick, a customer never will. It's absolutely ridiculous. We're in a terrible position in New York. We've got the two most incompetent leaders ever, de Blasio and Cuomo. And one thing about both of them, they both have in common, they hate restaurants. They don't go to restaurants. They don't go out. They have no idea what the restaurant world is like. And they just capriciously close them down in New York City. If you go outside New York City, to Long Island or to Westchester, their spike is double what it is in New York. And their restaurants are all open inside. So to close New York restaurants is devastating. It's about 400,000 people that work in the restaurant industry and another couple 100,000 that supply these restaurants. So it ripples out into the economy. And when they shut down, they can't pay the rent. So it ripples out into all the landlords in the real estate world. You know, one thing about Rudy Giuliani or George Pataki, our former governor, they used to walk the streets in a crisis. They'd be walking into restaurants, talking to people, getting a feel for things. These two, de Blasio and Cuomo, never leave the house and have no idea what's going on.
Speaking of de Blasio, we have him telling us that we may be facing, in New York City at least, full-on stay-at-home order shutdown. Here he is.
Unfortunately, I don't say it with anything but sorrow, but I do think it's needed. We're going to need to do some kind of shutdown in the weeks ahead, something that resembles the pause we were in the spring. And I think it will be overwhelmingly what we saw then. There may be some adjustments, Henry, but I think it's going to very much resemble what we saw in the spring. Essential work only.
He's talking about a stay-at-home. He's talking about a stay-at-home order. He can call it a pause. He can call it a sojourn to Tahiti. He can call it whatever he wants, Mark. He's saying that he's going to tell people that unless you are essential, which in California apparently includes podcast work, so they've got that going for them, but unless you're essential, you have to stay in your home until they say so.
It's unbelievable. You know, the big question is, if lockdowns work, why do we have to do it again? And if it didn't work, why do we have to do it again? It makes absolutely no sense. Why would you lock down all these restaurants? Why would you lock down stores when 300 people are allowed to cram into an airplane, which is a little tube, and they do this 40,000 times a day? That's how many flights we have. People crammed into these airplanes. You know, they'll tell you they got some special air filter system. Well, if that's the case, put that in the restaurant, put that in the stores. It makes no sense at all. As you just showed, most of the problem is home gatherings. If you close the stores, close the restaurants, the result is everybody has to gather at home and go to each other's homes. That's the biggest problem. These are the two most incompetent leaders we've ever had in New York. You know, Bin Laden plotted, how could I destroy New York? How could I ruin their economy? Had he only known, just send these two guys in. They'll do it in a couple of months.
Well, that was my next question for you, was going to be, what do you think the long-term prognosis is here for the city of New York? And I think you're going to see this play out. It is, in fact, playing out in some other major areas like San Francisco. Los Angeles isn't quite as bad as New York with this stuff, but it's getting hit pretty hard, too. There are other cities that are having a really rough time with this. But just looking at New York as the canary in the coal mine for everybody else, how do we come back from the destruction of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of small businesses, including restaurants? Who knows how much back rent that is, how they're going to collect from bankrupt businesses? It feels like the city is facing a kind of existential crisis even after the vaccine is getting distributed.
Yeah, you know, listen, New York always comes back. The question is, will it be 1 year? Will it be 5 years? And again, all these restaurants, we're going to lose 20,000 restaurants here. We're going to lose a lot of real estate companies, office buildings, skyscrapers. They'll sit empty. The other problem is the crime problem scares everybody away. So people won't rush back here. Tourists won't come. The crime problem keeps them away. In '86, when we had the crash here in New York City and everything was dirt cheap, the Japanese came in and bought up everything. They bought Rockefeller Center. They bought most of Fifth Avenue. So we got to worry when New York City totally is in collapse and abandoned buildings, abandoned restaurants. Who's going to come in and buy up all this? Could be the Chinese coming in snatching up bargains. Somebody should keep an eye on that. And if you got to keep an eye on the Chinese, I don't know that I trust Joe Biden on that.
I wouldn't trust Joe Biden on that one either. Let me ask you, Mark, are you a little surprised that there aren't more Democrats in major urban places like New York and in the major cities who have realized that this really, when I'm complaining about the closure of restaurants and what it's doing to small businesses, this isn't some Trump thing. This is just wanting businesses to be able to operate and wanting people's lives to not be ruined by capricious and arbitrary government power. What do you think it's going to take before they will finally say, before people that aren't Trump supporters, Democrats in these cities say, yeah, we're actually going to join those guys out in Times Square who are protesting? I thought it would be sooner, quite honestly.
Yeah, I don't know. The other problem is you got the crime spike, biggest crime spike in history. Restaurants are all closed. Broadway's closed. There's nothing going on here. So you've had more people leave New York than any other state has ever lost in history. We've lost so many people in New York in this new census. We're going to lose 2 congressional seats. You can't get a moving company in New York right now. There's a 4 to 6 month wait because they don't have enough moving vans. Moving vans are like the new ventilators. They can't get enough of them. So Governor Cuomo, U-Haul Employee of the Year, that's the other problem. And for all of you red states out there, if you're in South Carolina or if you're in Florida, you think, well, that's their problem. All these Democrats are moving to your state and going to take over at some point.
Yeah, we are having the outflow of New Yorkers that could very well change the voting demographics. And you and I both know when Democrats leave the blue state hellholes that are collapsing, they bring the same policies with. They never think maybe we should change things up this time around and vote for Republicans. But Mark, glad you're still here. I'm still sticking it out too at NYC. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your show on 710 WR. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
We'll examine just how wrong the media was on the COVID-19 vaccine coming up in today's Buck Brief, so stay tuned for that. I got a crash course into home title theft, and you better pray this crime never happens to you because it can ruin you financially. Here's how the crime happens. The legal titles to our homes are kept online where they can be hacked. A cyber thief finds your home's title, forges your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you sold your home to him. Then he takes out loans against your home until your equity is gone. You won't know until the collection calls pour in. You're not protected by insurance, your bank, or common identity theft programs. Home Title Lock protects you. And in the unlikely event you become a victim of title theft while a member, Home Title Lock will spend up to $250,000 in legal fees to help restore your home's title. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. Then use code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. Take action today. Don't wait on this one because it can be too late. Code RADIO at HometitleLock.com. That'll get you 30 free days of protection. They said it couldn't be done. They laughed, they scoffed, they even had to call the much vaunted fact checkers. It appears the only person laughing now is President Donald J. Trump. Because despite all the attacks he endured for his proclamation of a COVID vaccine by year's end, we see that he was right all along. The facts are clear and do not need to be checked. Over 2 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine are now being shipped out across the country, with millions more to follow. We also have not one but 2 different vaccines already for the public's use that have been approved. None of this would have been possible without President Trump's Operation Warp Speed, which expedited the creation and distribution of this vaccine to such a degree not thought possible by most mainstream experts. Time to give credit where credit is due. Love him or hate him, President Trump came through in his promises of a vaccine, and the media are the ones left with egg on their face. Let's examine all that media hypocrisy on the vaccine in today's Buck Brief. Oh, Kayleigh McEnany, White House press secretary, she led off today during the White House press conference with a salvo at the vaccine doubters. Remember, they didn't doubt the vaccine because they have concerns about the speed with which they'd be approving something that was unprecedented and modern medical history. No, it was because of Trump, right? That was the problem. Somehow that was going to taint this vaccine. And Trump was lying. He was exaggerating. That's what they were telling us. He was being his usual salesman self by saying that there could be a vaccine, there would be a vaccine by the end of the year. Trump was right. The media was wrong, and Kaylee reminded them of that. Play it.
The president promised a safe and effective vaccine in record time, and President Trump delivered. Earlier this year, we heard from several news outlets and so-called fact checks that President Trump would need, quote, a miracle to be right. That was an NBC News article. We were told, according to Healthline, quote, a vaccine will still take more than a year to develop. USA Today warned us that, quote, despite medical researchers' progress, the vaccine, quote, was more than a year away. And National Geographic even told us that achieving a vaccine within, quote, a year to 18 months would be absolutely unprecedented, end quote.
And yet here we are with the vaccine already getting injected into the arms of Americans, millions of doses on the march, so to speak, and this will be a turning point in the pandemic. They weren't giving the president any credit for this then. They're certainly not going to give him any credit now that it's clear that he was right in pushing forward with this and Operation Warp Speed's remarkable success. How remarkable is the success of Operation Warp Speed? Well, the president back on December 8th told everybody what the normal timeline would be.
Before Operation Warp Speed, the typical time frame for development and approval, as you know, could be infinity. And we were very, very happy that we were able to get things done at a level that nobody has ever seen before. The gold standard vaccine has been done in less than 9 months. On behalf of the entire nation, I want to thank everyone here today who has been involved in this extraordinary American initiative.
Would have taken years before. Typical timeline would have lasted years. Less than 1 year, President Trump, Operation Warp Speed, and yes, some great work from big pharmaceutical companies that managed to get this thing done and out there. How certain were the mainstream media folks out there that this was not going to happen? That they felt the need to object to the president even suggesting that it would happen? There's all these blue check MDs, we call them, right? These doctors who are now verified on the social media platforms who have created quite an industry for themselves by appearing on their favorite liberal cable news channel, MSNBC, CNN, any number of them, to downplay and talk down the president's choices, the president's strategy and policy successes. Here's a perfect example on the vaccine from MSNBC.
The promise was held out that we'll have a vaccine by the end of this year. Is that possible in your view?
Oh, Brian, you know, it's another day of POTUS in Wonderland here. It is preposterous to make that statement and also to kind of mislead the American people about what's possible, what's not possible. We could have a vaccine in 2 months if we wanted to forego the absolutely critical phase of long human testing to make sure that the vaccine works, and most importantly, that it's safe. It is impossible to get that done by the end of the year.
Impossible. Preposterous. That was his word. Preposterous for anyone to say this, to suggest this. That's what we're being told now, or that's what we were told then. I wonder if any of them are going to tweet out a little "I'm sorry, POTUS," or just maybe Brian Williams can tell everybody that he shouldn't have had people on his show making such outlandish claims, and doing so under the premise that they are experts that we all have to listen to. And then they're experts in nothing, like Soledad O'Brien, who thought that she knew something about Operation Warp Speed. She responded to Mitch McConnell in this way on Twitter: "Pfizer didn't take Operation Warp Speed funding." This is when Mitch McConnell wrote, "Thanks to the genius of science, historic success of Operation Warp Speed, and the bold action of the Trump administration." So Ms. O'Brien, formerly in the employ of CNN before they decided that they no longer wished for her services to be there. And then that's interesting because Pfizer actually responded about this. Pfizer announced the execution of an agreement with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense to meet the U.S. government's Operation Warp Speed program goal to begin delivering 300 million doses of a vaccine for COVID-19 in 2020. 21. So Pfizer is a part of Operation Warp Speed after all, and it was Operation Warp Speed that guaranteed the financial backing necessary for the pharmaceutical companies to take these very substantial risks of putting people through these incredibly lengthy and expensive human trials. It's possible that they might have had vaccine that didn't really work quite well enough, and they would have had to take an enormous financial loss. So without that federal government backing, we would not be in a place where we could even talk about it. Oh, and here's a great one. CNN analyst Jessica Huseman, she wanted a fact check of Trump in advance. Flag this tweet for when we do not have that vaccine by the end of the year, when Trump said, good numbers coming out of the states that are opening. America is getting its life back. Vaccine work is looking very promising before the end of the year. Okay, let's do that fact check. The facts now tell us that Donald Trump was right, the media was wrong, they're a bunch of frauds, they don't know what they're talking about. We could go on, but I think you get the idea. The fact checkers need to learn what facts are. You may not know it, but today marks an important anniversary in our nation's history, that of the ratification of the Bill of Rights. After the break, we'll talk to Knox County, Tennessee Mayor Glenn Jacobs about the importance of protecting those rights. Happy Bill of Rights Day. On this day in 1791, the Founding Fathers ratified the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which, of course, includes, among other things, protections for speech, assembly, religion, and the right to bear arms. The anniversary is all the more important this year in light of the circumstances in which we currently find ourselves. As we discuss frequently on this show, Americans have become subject to restrictions and public health measures of dubious constitutionality. Last month, for example, the Supreme Court ruled that attendance limits placed on religious gatherings were unconstitutional, with Justice Neil Gorsuch writing, quote, while the pandemic poses many grave challenges, there is no world in which the Constitution tolerates color-coded executive edicts that reopen liquor stores and bike shops but shutter churches, synagogues, and mosques. Despite the ruling, it appears that many Americans are growing increasingly comfortable with these restrictions, an alarming fact to say the least. Joining us now is Glenn Jacobs, mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, and a vocal defender of American liberties. Mayor Jacobs, good to see you.
Hey, Buck, how are you?
How do you gauge where we are right now in our struggle for basic constitutional freedom and individual liberty? I have to say I've been surprised at how much the American people overall across the country have been willing to put up with when it comes to the dictates of elected officials that are trampling on constitutional rights.
I think it varies state by state and in some cases community by community. Of course, when we look at the blue states such as California and New York, the things that are going on there, it's a lot different here in Tennessee and other places. The folks here in Tennessee, we've managed to keep things as normal as a situation like this can be, and respected people's freedom of choice, as well as the liberties enshrined in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. But it is worrying when I look at other parts of the country and see some of the things that 9 months ago would we have even envisioned that these things could be going on in America. And I don't think we could, but unfortunately they are.
It seems to me that we're also getting a bit of a lesson in the capricious nature, the arbitrary nature of so many government edicts. In that Supreme Court decision that we mentioned in the introduction here, Gorsuch was pointing out that it has been the case that in states like New York and California, they have given greater protection to smoke shops and liquor stores than they have to church when it comes to the pandemic and the necessary functions that these things pose. It feels to me, Mayor Jacobs, like we're getting a lesson there.
I believe so. Again, here in Tennessee, the governor has not touched churches. He offered some recommendations and said, hey, I really want you guys to do this, but we believe in freedom of religion here, and we don't believe that government under any circumstances can tell churches, mosques, or synagogues, or temples, or anything else what they can do. I think when we look at, say, Gavin Newsom and just some of the things that have come out of California, it really is, as you said, capricious. I mean, they make decisions, say they're based on science. The science doesn't back it up. Everybody at this point realizes that the lockdowns have not been able to contain the spread of COVID-19. In fact, when we look at states that are experiencing surges, and Tennessee is right there, unfortunately. But in many cases, these are states that have already had strict restrictions in place, and now they're doubling down with even more stringent restrictions. And it's Einstein's definition of insanity. If something doesn't work, well, you just keep on doing it over and over and over again. And again, that's especially true when we look at something like freedom of religion. Our country is really founded on the idea of religious freedom, and that is being undermined in some parts of the country.
How is Tennessee? I mean, this is particularly interesting to hear because, New York and California, because of the extreme nature of the lockdowns, the duration of them, get a lot of attention. Florida, from conservatives, gets a fair amount of attention because it does not go to those extremes and has been, in terms of hospitalizations and fatalities, considerably better over the course of the pandemic than, say, New York or even California now. How has Tennessee been doing, and what lessons learned in terms of the balance between safety and liberty do you feel your state has picked up?
When we look at Florida and compare with Tennessee, we've done many of the same things that Florida has done. Governor Lee just hasn't been on the various cable news networks talking about it like Governor DeSantis has. Unfortunately, now we are seeing a big spike in cases and hospitalizations and tragically deaths. And that's, again, when we compare us to the rest of the country, this is something that's been going on everywhere. So I think that we've been able to do a good job of balancing the public health aspect while also respecting people's liberties and rights. This is, in the end, this is a terrible situation. And I think that we all need to realize that it's not something that's going to go away tomorrow, unfortunately. But at the same point in time, there is going to be an end. And I think that's something that we really need to think about moving forward is the damage that's being done to our system of government and to our political system. And can that be walked back? Can that be reeled in? When you give a politician power, they aren't apt to give it up very easily. So, as we walk the rest of the way through this pandemic, hopefully to see an end, I think that's going to be the country's next challenge is when we talk about normal, will we get back to a normal system of government that Americans have been used to in the past?
How concerned are you that there will be additional efforts even after the distribution of the vaccine gets to the kind of widespread numbers where we could talk about herd immunity, that there will be other, either state by state or perhaps even under a Biden administration, federal initiatives to use a health emergency to once again tell everybody that the Constitution, at least in some places, in some cases, does not count anymore?
I think there is a real danger of that. We're already seeing that. Initially, this whole thing was 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then a month, and then that was months and months ago. And now we're told that when a vaccine became available, that was a really good sign. But now we're being told that we're going to have to keep up with restrictions even for the foreseeable future. We look around the world. Calgary, Alberta, Canada actually just extended their mask mandate till December of 2021. And we see public health officials, not only in the U.S., but around the world saying that this is going to go on for throughout the rest of next year and on. So that is very troubling that when do we finally get to say, that we are America again? Then that the freedoms and liberties that are the bedrock of this country, that they're important, and that, yes, public health is of course vital, but at the same point in time, we have to realize that we can't sacrifice what makes us America for this. At some point, it's going to be an illusion of health and safety, I believe.
Mayor Jacobs, good to see you, sir. Always a pleasure. Thanks for talking to us.
Thanks, Buck. I appreciate it.
Coming up, our daily rundown of left-wing lunacy known as the buckshot. Fellow patriots, MAGA CBD is a revolutionary American-made product that is safe for work, THC-free, and features patented NASA technology, making it the highest quality CBD oil on the market. Dedicated to providing the purest, most effective products on the market, MAGA CBD provides third-party testing results from industry-leading experts. MAGA CBD is 100% committed to customer satisfaction and product quality. Best of all, 10% of proceeds benefit veterans and first responders. Personally, MAGA CBD has helped me sleep through the night, something that I used to struggle with. You can really feel and taste the difference with their apple pie flavored oil. What CBD product on the market could be more American? MAGA, NASA, apple pie. It's America at its finest, friends. For your CBD needs, look no further than MAGA CBD. Learn more and order today at magacbd.org and save 10% with promo code BUCK. That's magacbd.org, promo code BUCK. The media ignores a not good story on Governor Cuomo. Fauci changes his mind on herd immunity, and Mitt Romney is being Mitt Romney. It's all coming up in tonight's Buckshot. Governor Cuomo. I don't like this guy. You know that if you watch this show or if you listen to me on radio. You know that I think that he's a thug and a clown and not a funny one. And he has done a terrible job running New York during the COVID pandemic, but turns out he's got problems even beyond that. He has a reputation for being a vicious guy, a vindictive guy, but he now might, at least you could say that he is alleged to have engaged in sexual harassment. Now, I'm somebody who believes in the presumption of innocence as a legal principle, but also as a general principle in public discourse, that just because someone's accused of something doesn't mean they did it. But I do know that the left and the libs and the Democrats, they've been saying for some time that women have a right to be believed, but that doesn't seem to apply to Democrats when they're accused, does it? All of a sudden, that changes somewhat dramatically. This was Governor Cuomo yesterday during a press conference saying, this is just, well, I'll let him say it.
It's not true, Zach. Look, I fought for and I believe a woman has the right to come forward and express her opinion and express issues and concerns that she has. But it's just not true.
She has the right to express her opinions, but it's not true. So he's saying she's lying. And I just think it's interesting that he won't say that. Just say she's lying. But he won't do that. But as importantly to our discussion here, the Media Research Center looked at this because there's also the way that the media reacts to this stuff. The Media Research Center reported that ABC, NBC, and CBS all ignored Boylan's claims the first 24 hours after allegations became public. And on Sunday night, there was silence from the networks. On Monday morning, NBC's Today Show, CBS This Morning, ABC's Good Morning America all avoided even mentioning the accusations against the governor, despite a combined 6 hours of available airtime, according to the Media Research Center. So women have a right to say stuff when it's a Democrat, but certainly not a right to be believed, and also not a right for anyone in the media to care about the stuff they say about prominent Democrat politicians who might actually be in a Joe Biden cabinet, in this case as Attorney General. That's what we're hearing. Another guy that I'm not a fan of, Dr. Fauci, who I think has been catastrophically wrong at various critical points in the COVID-19 pandemic and our fight against it. And here he is telling you that, well, at least we will be looking at herd immunity maybe in June.
The real bottom line is, when do you get the majority, the overwhelming majority of the population vaccinated so you can get that umbrella of herd immunity? And I believe if we're efficient about it and we convince people to get vaccinated, we can accomplish that by the end of the second quarter of 2021, namely by the end of the late spring, early summer.
He always talks about the data. I look at the data. What is the number? What is the percentage? How will we even know whether we've achieved herd immunity? And what would that threshold look like? Are they going to give us a number? Because here's a prediction. They're going to keep saying we're close, even when the cases in terms of deaths and hospitalizations are far, far down. They'll be saying, we're not there yet, it's still out there, and they're going to drag it on, and they're going to drag it out. And they're going to say that you have to still obey, you have to still listen to us, we're not done with you yet. And millions of Americans will look around and say, I've either already had COVID, and they say, well, we don't know how long your immunity lasts. Chances are it's going to last for quite a while. I've already had COVID, or they're going to say, well, I've gotten the vaccine. How much longer am I supposed to wait before I go back to normal? And the bureaucrat public health experts are going to tell you, you wait until they say so. They're not going to give you any hard and fast numbers. They're not really going to give you any projections until they say so. Yeah, that's right. Your freedom is in the hands of guys like this who are unaccountable and who are constantly wrong, and they don't seem to care. Speaking of constantly wrong, well, he's wrong on most things most of the time. He's also, I think you could say, a Democrat now, although he's technically a Republican. Mitt Romney always shows up just in time to say something annoying so we can make fun of it on shows like this. Let's hear what Mitt had to say.
I thought I was going to win too when I ran for president in 2012. I didn't. I didn't go out and say fraud. That's, we have a process. We count the votes. That's the way it is. And I'm concerned that the cause of democracy here, as well as around the world, people look to us. We're the democratic leader of the world. What's going on now, I'm afraid, is terribly dispiriting to people all over the globe.
You know what I thought was dispiriting, Mitt? When you voted to remove a president from office as a United States Senator for a completely legal phone call that we now know was discussing something that is not only a legitimate point of inquiry, but is actually a legitimate federal investigation. But Mitt wanted to get a pat on the head from the New York Times. Mitt wanted to get that one moment of, he's one of the not so bad ones from CNN, and he got it. And now what? He thinks he's going to establish some kind of a leadership position within the GOP? This is a guy that we have to listen to going forward? I don't think so, Mitt. Not while Trump is still out there making the case for America first. I don't think anyone's going to say, yeah, let's go with the Romneyite school so that then we can just occasionally get the scraps from the liberal table. I don't think so. Ilhan Omar. This one makes me kind of happy. But I think that it's not true. I'll tell you why. Ilhan Omar is, one of the squad, one of the far left radicals in the Democrat Party. And she's got quite a social media following, quite a national profile for a relatively new member of Congress. It's her, it's Ayanna Pressley, it's AOC, perhaps the leader of the squad. There are a number of them, and they're socialists and they're very left-wing. They're worried that the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democrat Party, to which I think you could say they belong, isn't getting enough love in a would-be Biden cabinet. Play it.
Senator Bernie Sanders has said he doesn't think the progressive movement has a big enough seat at the table with the Biden team. Do you agree with him?
I do. And this is, what we have been saying and asking for. We worked diligently in trying to make sure that the people understood that it was important for us to get rid of Trump, but to have someone who was going to be partner with us in governing for progress in our country.
I don't think this is actually what's going to end up happening. I think right now they want to pose, or rather, the whole point here is that Biden will pose as a moderate. The lefties will all complain about this. And then you'll see what the policies are. And then they'll be much happier because Biden is malleable. You could even say, as the Chinese maybe have found out, that Biden's principles are for sale. We'll get into that more. That's it for Hold the Line today. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is up next. Shields high.